Ironically, the high level of safety that airline travel provides is a luxury that corporate aviation is not always afforded. In fact, flying on a corporate jet is more dangerous than flying on an airliner. But how much more dangerous? Probably worse than you think. Modern air travel. A miracle of human innovation, logistics, and safety advancements. When you board a commercial flight, you might be thinking about what movie you'll watch, or maybe about making your tight connection. However, one thing almost certainly not on your mind is if you'll make it to your destination in one piece. U.S. domestic air travel is among the safest in the world, with a fatal accident rate of around 1 every decade. Corporate aviation, on the other hand, has over 14 times that rate. From 2008 to 2024, there have been 169 fatal corporate aviation accidents at an average rate of nearly 10 per year. However, when adjusted for aircraft utilization hours against the airlines, it's actually closer to 70 times the accident rate. Today, I'm going to demonstrate the many hazards of corporate aviation so that we can best mitigate them in your flight department. But before we dive in, it's important to understand the extent of the problem so that we can attack this issue most directly. Corporate jets like this one are certified under the exact same rules and regulations with safety systems and redundancies as airliners. This raises an important question. Why then is it so much more unsafe to fly in a corporate jet than it is in an airliner? After interviewing dozens of corporate aviation professionals, conducting hundreds of hours of peer-reviewed research, and after years of extensive corporate flying experience, I think I've got the answer. It's an uncomfortable thought to imagine that your flight department might not be as safe as it could be for your high-value clients. However, from the pilots I've interviewed, they've indicated that many corporate flight department leaders actually have misaligned values on safety. What you're about to hear is a series of confidential interviews with experienced corporate aviation leaders like active CEOs and Director of Operations, as well as FAA personnel and corporate pilots expressing their serious concerns.
There is a large portion of the industry where unfortunately we see it weekly where that accidents happen due to a lack of an initiative on safety.
What corporate or managerial pressures did you notice that could contribute or detract from safety?
They're more or less trying to convince you that the problem either doesn't exist, the problem is less significant than it actually really is, or the problem's not a problem at all. The chief pilot will lean on you to take the flight anyways to get the job done, and they want to get these problems serviced 2 or 3 flights down the road at another place. But I think there's always pressure to do things and rewards for doing things that are considered to be unsafe.
I think that in some organizations, the safety is compromised by cost. It just seems like we have a somewhat of a shortage of experienced folks at the top.
Have you noticed any attitudes or pressures in management or owners that would cause pilots to operate in a less safe way?
Yeah, quite a bit. They're always questioning everything you do, which makes it hard for some pilots to keep that safety in mind, because they get a paycheck, it may be a good paycheck, and they don't want to lose it. So money talks. My son's a DOM. He had this. He took this one job, and none of the airplanes had any maintenance, routine maintenance done, scheduled inspections, or any of that stuff. And the brakes were really bad, and all. And he was like, "Dad, I don't know what to do." He grounded all the airplanes, and they all freaked out. And then he told them, "Look what's been going on. They haven't put oil. They haven't done this. They haven't done that." Because the aviation manager fired the other mechanic because he kept on wanting to do it, to get the stuff done, but he wouldn't let him because of the cost. most people do hide the airworthiness from you when you go out to fly.
Though these comments are concerning, they only address one aspect of what makes corporate aviation rather hazardous. Another aspect that's really important to consider are the deep training deficiencies that reduce flight safety in corporate aviation.
Training. That's kind of my biggest concern right now. Is training has gotten so expensive and so crowded now that there's no room for failure. And with that, I think you're seeing a decline in what's accomplished in training.
You know, if you focus on just the same things that you're going to do for every checking event, then you don't get a chance to focus on some of the other things, because invariably you run out of time.
They really don't teach CRM or management between the two. They always say it. Oh, you guys work good together. And you're like going, where in the hell were you sitting? This guy was all over the place and was no help at all. He didn't do this, and but you don't say those things. You kind of keep them to yourselves. Pilots are always kind of like, we don't want to say things because we just want to get through the process, get through the check ride and move on.
It's easy to not say something about a process or a concept than to say something about it and potentially be liable about what is said. Just recently we had another a fatal stall accident in our platform. People are afraid to give information about it because if something happens, then they are afraid of being held liable, when maybe what we should be doing is discussing it so that people are aware of the hazards.
I think actually, one of the things to look at is on the instructor side of the house, to make sure your instructors are trained well. And sometimes we look at the client training only, but before you can train clients, you've got to make sure your instructors are trained well. And the instructor training programs themselves sometimes can be, strengthened in different areas.
I find that sometimes instructors in 142 schools, they're not necessarily synchronized in their messaging. I find that leads to confusion from clients and students are left to have to decipher on their own what they should consider to be true versus not.
Most folks that leave a 142 school, particularly a new initial course out of any given airplane, and you put them in the right seat, and then for whatever reason they're going to have to land that plane on day one, I don't think they're equipped.
There's one major category of hazards that remain unaddressed, and that is the issue of regulation. The regulations are outdated and don't particularly protect the safety needs of modern flight departments.
I think a lot of the FAA's enforcement actions or their perceived enforcement solutions to try to curtail this type of behavior is focused at the wrong group. I think really that I think pilots as a whole try to do a good job and are professional, and it's just unfortunate that the folks who are trying to influence the pilots sometimes in a negative way aren't held accountable for their actions and for those pressures that they're bringing to bear. The people who own corporate airplanes, who own charter companies, I think the upper echelon of those folks, I don't think they're educated enough on safety and what affects safety in corporate flight operations, which is it's a detriment to the entire industry and to the flying public as well.
Have you ever flown fatigued or known other corporate pilots that have?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Fatigue is a much bigger danger than most people will give it credit for.
Yes, I've flown fatigue. We've all have gone to the point of one more leg, and then I'll call fatigue. And once you take off, you realize that you're already fatigued.
Yes, I've flown fatigued a few times.
Yes, sir. Oh, yes. I have worked for companies before of mission-driven, mission profile. I had witnessed a lot of that.
Yes.
How often does that happen?
It was at least a couple times a week.
Duty time. I mean, I think they equate, operating an airplane for 12 hours the same as operating a bulldozer or a semi-truck, or plumbing or electrical or whatever kind of work you're doing. I don't think they understand really the mental fatigue that can be prevalent in a cockpit versus the other occupations and other activities that they're more familiar with. I think education there and understanding on those folks, it would go a long way.
91, by definition, is the low end of the scale in terms of pilot proficiency and pilot safety. The level of safety and the margin of safety depends entirely on the financial health of the company. As the financial health of a company declines, so does the margin of safety. That's number one. That fact should shake POIs, the FAA, NTSB, Roger, into demanding that 91 meet 135 regs.
I'm not one for over-regulating things, but at the same time, there are some regulations though that just make a lot of sense. You shouldn't drink and drive. You should wear your seatbelt. So I would say that there probably should be some. Yeah, there probably should be some structured program for duty regulations. But I do think as paid professionals, I think we should be held to a higher standard.
I feel like there should be even for Part 91, there should be a duty day limit that goes back to safety of flight.
How common is it for corporate pilots to fly unairworthy or technically unairworthy aircraft?
Oh, every day. I mean, that happens every day. I'd say probably 30 to 40% of the time.
How common is it for corporate pilots to fly unairworthy aircraft?
Oh boy, and now it's anonymous, right? There's pilots out there that will fly the airplane even if it's taped on, the wing is taped on. They kind of have that attitude, that cowboy attitude, but their reputation is known. There are people out there, that's why they hire these guys to do do like contract flying for them, because they know that even if the airplane is like really messed up, the person will fly it. He'll go out there and he'll give it his all and try to take it out there, knowing that the airplane is unairworthy.
How common is it for corporate pilots to fly unairworthy aircraft?
I know it could be very common. When it comes to, some of the rules and regulations that, if people are not properly managing.
I think it takes a lot of intestinal fortitude and character sometimes to resist that type of pressure, because typically that pressure comes from someone who is above the particular pilot and who, has that pilot's basically their livelihood in their hands when it comes to their job and compensation and all those kind of things.
Do you think the lack of universal standard operating procedures, do you think that has an adverse effect on corporate aviation safety?
Absolutely. 100%. I think that's true. I've seen plenty of examples of people sort of making up what they think is the correct thing to do, which, not any fault of their own. Again, without the information being disseminated, people are left to try to figure it out.
Do you find that the lack of standardized operating procedures is an issue for corporate aviation flight safety?
100% yes. That I said communication is the foundation of safety. The very next rung on that ladder is a robust standard operating procedures program. That is the next rung in the ladder of safety. If you don't have that, that's where your safety ends, in my opinion. To increase our safety record, there are going to be things that happen that are out of our control that a good safety program or good training are not going to fix. But I would say that's probably the case, though, for over 90% of the incidents out there. Had they had the safety programs in place and the proper training, these incidents wouldn't have happened or wouldn't be as bad as they were.
At this point, I think it's clearly evident that these problems are serious and systemic. But here's the good news. Your department is not powerless. Your passengers deserve a higher standard of safety, and we shouldn't be waiting around for the next accident or fatality to happen before we act. There are things we can do today to make the industry a better place. And the change starts with you.
If we're aware there's a problem, then we should be driven to fix it, and that represents a moral obligation. The more we respect and honor the systems of accountability, the more we can protect each other as people in a society. At the end of the day, if a person remains stuck in the current system that's driven by greed or selfishness, they're in fact abiding in a system of fear towards accountability and authority. And that's really kind of hurting yourself for no good reason.